Welcome to the Wealth Done Differently Retirement Podcast. Danielle Howard, a certified financial planner, shares insight into the financial tools, techniques, and temperaments needed to make the most of your retirement dollars and relationships. Danielle bridges the gap between Wall Street and Main Street, bringing complex financial topics down to earth. Danielle will educate and inspire you as you define and refine your version of prosperity.
Hello and welcome to Wealth Done Differently Retirement with Danielle Howard, a certified financial planner. Good morning, Danielle. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you, Eric.
Oh, I'm excited. I love the theme of this podcast. You shared it with me before we started talking, or before we started recording, I should say. And it's kind of lessons learned from your fridge. And I think that if my freezer could speak, it would say a few things about how often I visit the ice cream area. But other than that, I don't know what lessons we're learning from our fridge. So I'm excited to get into this. What's going on?
Well, I want to welcome our listeners today. Mm-hmm. And I know you're going to have some fun with this one and maybe feel a little bit of my pain and glean some insight around the new season of life called refirement, the fall season. I do think that these podcasts, are going to help folks as we dig into some financial technical pieces, or we're just going to dig into quality of life. I just want to make sure that you guys listen to this with the idea that get some ideas, get some context, and then take this to your personal financial advisor or get the advice based on your specific situation. Have somebody that knows you, knows what's going on before you make any decisions around either financial tools or, addressing the temperaments or any financial techniques that you want to look at heading into retirement. My story revolves around what happens when you leave home for a while. I was gone for 10 days at some conferences, and Mark came down. We were down in Denver for the final 3 days of a conference. Mm-hmm. So we drove home together and opened the front door, walked into the kitchen, and found a big puddle of water in front of our fridge.
Oh, no.
So, go grab the towel.
And it wasn't the dog.
That up.
It
was not the dog.
Okay, well, sometimes it would be better if it was the dog, but oh goodness.
Yeah, so you're going, oh my gosh, is there a leak? But just the fact that it was a puddle and not running throughout the house, It was a little better than we thought. So I opened the door and it just felt warm. And scooped the coconut milk, and that smells a bit off. Opened the freezer, and that was a real bummer because when you open the freezer and food in the freezer is cold, but it's completely unthawed, something is awry. What was really a bummer is I'd been gone for 10 days and, for the weekend with Mark. And so we'd stopped at the grocery store on the way home, and I had company coming over that night.
Oh, this isn't going well.
Yeah. So, you immediately kind of go into panic mode. No place to keep things cold. And the puddle of water on the floor was all the ice that had melted and drained out of the ice maker. We've got one that has the ice maker in the door lock.
Yeah.
So we didn't even have ice for cocktails. So I just total panic. Had a couple hours to put dinner together, and I could have called my friends and we could have canceled, could have gone out to dinner. But as I've shared in past podcasts, I love to cook. It is a way I really, express creativity and share love with friends and family. And I'd been eating out for 10 days. I did not want to go eat out. So we, called the neighbors. What can we store in the freezer? What can we, disperse amongst our neighbors? I went through the fridge, sniffing. My nose was on high alert. Was anything salvageable? I, dove into what was I going to cook for dinner and discerned how to make that happen. So we, started taking stuff over to the neighbors and I told my husband, I said, Mark, go get a cooler. Go get a cooler and dry ice. Just get one of those really good big coolers.
Mm-hmm.
And, I started, unpacking the bags and prepping the evening meal. And, about a half hour later, he walks in with a very large, very heavy duty cooler, name I will not mention, but it pretty much cost as much as a new refrigerator.
I know which name that is, but I won't mention it either.
Yeah, I'll probably know which one it is. They're amazing. They're really good.
Yeah.
Okay. And then on top of it, I forgot to have him get a ice, the bag of ice for cocktails. So, he turned around.
Did he get the dry ice?
Out. We had dry ice.
Oh, okay. Well, that'll make interesting cocktails.
Get him, the cocktail ice.
Yeah.
So it's starting to sound like a fun evening, huh?
Oh, yeah.
It was a little bit chaotic. The dinner and evening with friends, it turned out lovely. We had a just wonderful dinner. It all turned out really yummy, and they were very, very happy. And we had a lovely visit. And when it was all said and done, took a deep breath, stepped back, and I began to think about how my emotions hijacked my financial decision-making process. And this was, a really simple little thing, but being in the world that I'm in, I really resonate with the idea that we need to look at how our emotions get in the way of making good financial decisions, whether it was running out and buying a big expensive cooler. Was that the best way to deal with this particular situation?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we can all relate to this. I think that everybody out there in their head is going, yeah, I've got one of those, those times in my life where I ended up spending a lot of money on something that may or may not have been the best choice. And it was because it was emotionally charged. Can you relate to that one?
Just slightly. And I have a brief story that just happened 2 days ago.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So my wife and I volunteer at church, and we work with the youth. And they had an event at a pumpkin patch here locally near the Omaha area. And it's just out a little ways, not too far, but it's right off of a highway. And so just about a 4-lane highway. And drove there. Everything was fine. And my wife and I, with the church, bought us a large metal cart that it's kind of foldable, and the sides fold up and down. And so we use that. It's got nice big pneumatic tires, so you can go on rough terrain and all that.
Yep.
And so we loaded all the s'more stuff, all the hot dog makings for the high schoolers, all the stuff into this cart, and walked it down, cooked the had them cook the hot dogs, did s'mores, had a great evening. We're getting ready to leave. We pack everything back into the car, and I'm making my way out of the pumpkin patch, and I'm up at the road, and some cars zip by. And I mean, it's a highway, 65 miles an hour or so. And so you're basically pulling from a driveway into a highway. And so I looked and I saw some cars that were quite a ways away. And I don't know if there's cars behind them or not, but I didn't really hesitate to look, because I was like, okay, I got to get going. Stepped on the gas, got onto the highway. And right when I stepped on that gas, that cart went through my back window.
Oh, no.
Yes. Yeah. So it was a loud boom. Lots of glass flying at that point. Nothing up front, to us. But at that point, there's really nothing I can do. Pulling over does nothing. You just drive with a giant hole in your window and go to the first gas station to use their vacuums to, yeah. So that the fact that I didn't wait to see if there was nobody after those next cars where I could have pulled out normally and not hit the gas hard to make that cart roll back fast. It was just a poor decision, and I made it in a spur of the moment kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
I didn't take time to think. So yeah, that's a $350
those are those that also it falls into the category of what did I just say? Poor decisions stupid mistakes that cost less of money.
That's the one. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it falls in that category very well.
But we all do it, and we all have to give ourselves a little bit of grace and laugh about it. But it's we end up spending money sometimes on things that we hadn't either anticipated or hadn't wanted to do. This was one when the next day we called the repair person, and yes, the refrigerator is 2.5 years old. I still have warranty coverage on it. But they can't get a repair person out here for a week. And now we found out it's going to be more than a week. And then if it is repairable, how long will it take to fix? So in my fridge freezer situation, we had to come up with a creative way to deal with, how are we going to have a functional kitchen for the next week or two? And I get this is a first world problem. And, there are many people around the world who don't have refrigeration. So I understand that this is all, our little first world problems. But the next day I put it out on Facebook, and one of our boating buddies offered to lend us his, really big, expensive cooler that we take out on our 5-day boating expeditions. And, we could freeze water at our neighbor's house and we could alternate them. It was going to be a pain in the tail end. But even with a very large, expensive cooler, we were going to have to be dealing with how to keep it cool. And at the moment of this recording, we've got, 72 degrees during the day here in the Roaring Fork Valley. But at night, it gets nice and cool. But I can't use the outside as my second refrigerator, as I often do in the winter when I need extra room.
Yeah.
So this, large impulsive purchase wouldn't, have a huge impact on our life. And I actually had Mark take it back the next day and exchange it for a smaller one that was better suited for, weekend day trips and summer grocery runs. But there are bigger financial decisions in our life that very often get made under this emotional duress.
Yeah.
And in our podcast with Jason around financial fraud, we were talking about how emotions and how our brains are wired to not serve us well with financial decisions. And as we're looking at the limbic brain, the emotional brain, it can get the better of us. And we need to address this, especially when the consequences are irreversible or have longer term impact, which is many times the case as we're heading into the fall season of life. We may be looking at, how to take Social Security. When is the best time to take Social Security? Or how should I turn on a stream of income from my 401k? Or many, many other financial decisions. Where are we going to live? What does this need to look like? And I like to introduce 3 ideas today on making better financial decisions.
All right, I'm ready.
All right. The first one, and this is definitely the hardest, is to ponder. I'm gonna put these under the categories of capital P's. So if we can ponder, if we can acknowledge that this is how we are hardwired, it's reflexed instead of reflect. And if we can capture that one idea, that it is just how our brains work, and that we can create an understanding that anxiety is going to cloud our thoughts and judgment.
Yes.
Especially when we're stressed.
Yep.
This is the first step. When it comes to money, fear and greed are emotions that are easily triggered. As soon as you turn on the TV or listen to anything on the radio or on your computer, and the stock market is falling, we're headed for a recession, a depression, and you immediately go into that. Oh my goodness, the sky is falling. I need to get out. Call your broker, get me out, put me in cash. That's an emotional response to something that may or may not be true. And you're trying to time the market, and it's not going to serve you well.
Yeah. And it's so interesting that this is your first one, because the other thing that I would say is that people need to understand they are not immune to this. They're not immune to it. They think, oh no, I'm not going to make that mistake. And I remember the last podcast we had, you had a guest on, and some of the statistics they were talking about by people getting taken advantage of, especially those in older years, seniors, a lot of them were very highly educated, very educated about money, and they just didn't think they could be taken advantage of. This is kind of the same situation where I'm not going to have the emotion of it. I'm not going to make a decision based on emotion, but you just don't know that you're doing it a lot of times. You just get caught up in a moment.
Right.
So yeah, that's tough.
we're going to talk about some ways to combat that. But first is recognizing that we all fall into this. The idea that, I've heard people say, I haven't saved enough for my golden years, so I need to get on this new investment. Jason again was talking about people succumbing to financial fraud or going to a workshop where they're touting the latest and greatest out there that you're going to make a, quote unquote guaranteed return. And you're fearful. These are emotions that are playing on you. And you don't want to make decisions before really doing your homework and checking out what your situation is and how, this may or may not impact you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same thing, I mentioned Social Security. I hear this all the time. Oh, the government's going to go broke, so I'd better take it at 62. Well, really? The government just prints more money. And yes, we need to understand how Social Security fits into our future and make sure we're optimizing it and what is the best way to take it. But just playing on that fear that, the government's going to go broke is not tapping into your rational part of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of ponder and acknowledge that this is how we're hardwired. This is our emotions are the first place that any information goes. It filters through our emotions. If we don't capture those emotions, we're more likely to make financial decisions that don't serve us to our best and higher purposes.
Yep. And the only people that don't fall into this situation are robots. That's it. So unless you're
which
a robot,
is again why a lot of, the investing nowadays, I don't manage my, clients' own investments. We discern about what algorithms we want to be, running this stuff, how we, when is the right time to be using different types of investment strategies based on, people's values and what's important to them. But we need to capture that emotion and take it off the table.
Yes, definitely.
So taking pause, catch yourself when you're entering into an emotionally charged situation. It's hard to do. I mean,
extremely.
Did I catch, especially when you've got company coming over for dinner in a couple hours and there's a puddle of water on your floor and I'm aware of this stuff and it was still hard for me to capture this. I mean, I've been very well versed. I've lived through, 3 recessions in my career. And, I have dealt with the emotional implications of, fear in the markets. And I can walk somebody through some stuff that, I've dealt with on a professional level, but put me into a personal situation and it's a little harder to capture that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So take pause when you're faced with financial decision, whether it's an unanticipated purchase to a major life event. In your situation, you basically had to just deal with something that was very unfortunate. I guess you capturing your emotion would have been, okay, I'm not going to pull out as fast. I'm just going to wait for traffic to go by until I, go out.
And I should have pondered whether or not the cart was secure in the car before I took off. That would have been a good one too. But when you brought up the unanticipated purchase, I thought of those 2 things, right? I mean, you're talking about a fridge, a cooler. I'm talking about a rear window, but those are all things because something else happened. There's an antecedent to that action or that need. Yep. But you and I've talked about on this podcast before that I fell victim to myself, my own emotion, my wife's emotion, and leased a minivan and with 3 TV screens and everything that we didn't need because the emotion of it was, this is fantastic. Look how safe this thing is. It has airbags upon airbags, and then there's airbags for the airbags. It's amazing, right? And that emotion of excitement, it wasn't even an emotion of, or an unanticipated purchase, from something that got damaged. It was an unanticipated purchase that just blew our budget out of the water. Or I think of a lot of people that go to these seminars for timeshare, those types of things that you may go because some friends invited you, just want to go and check it out and see what it's like. And all of a sudden at the end, you're signing the dotted line on something that you can't really afford, or maybe you can afford it, but it's definitely something that's coming out of your budget that wasn't coming out yesterday. Right?
Is it the best decision?
Yeah.
Exactly. Whether it's an unanticipated or just something that you think is going to satisfy a need. And this is where I just start talking about, is it an ego desire, or is it a soul need? And that's a whole nother podcast. But catching yourself, taking pause before you either make any type of purchase, whether it's anticipated or not, is a good idea. It may be just a few minutes. It may be an hour, and timeshare, they put the pressure. If you walk out of here, you're going to miss this deal, and many times it's like, I'm walking out of here. I'm going to take a walk around the block. I am going to take a couple deep breaths before I head to the store or hit that purchase button or sign on the dotted line. They actually talk about, and this may be, for some folks may want to try this out, but they talk about alternate nostril breathing, that if you actually take deep breaths while plugging one side of your nose and then plugging the other side of your nose, that it activates both sides of your brain, the rational and the emotional. I haven't personally tried it, so if folks out there want to give it a shot, then let me know how it or if it works. But that's an idea. The idea that we want to catch ourselves, we want to halt if we're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. These, just physical places that we find ourselves, these impact our financial decisions. So maybe a timeout, which can last 6 months after or a year after either a divorce or death or a job shift. But bottom line is we, don't want to make financial decisions when we're emotionally charged. And bottom line, I don't think there are any financial decisions that need to be made when you are right in that moment of pure emotional heat.
Yep, absolutely.
Finally, we want to look at process and plan. When you can be proactive in as many areas of your financial life as possible, I get stuff happens, and that's why we want to have that emergency opportunity sitting on the side. But the larger the financial decision, the more your emotions are going to want to take over. And as people age, if they have been prone to emotional decision making throughout their life, that's just going to amplify. We look at, all aspects of our character. And as we age, it's like just putting a magnifying glass on it. The more money you have, the more it amplifies your financial personality. The older we get, the more it amplifies our character traits. So if you've been, kind of prone to that emotional side of things, you want to harness that sooner than later. We want to look at how do we tap into the prefrontal cortex, that rational. How do we delve into looking at, what kind of foresight? How do we need to look down the road? How do we want to look at hindsight? What have we learned from our past? And ultimately, we want to look at insight. We want to look at the wisdom needed to make these financial decisions. Take the time to chart your course, lay out your options, educate yourself about implications, balance out that emotional and rational part of your brain. I'm not saying we don't want to make, just totally rational, logical financial decisions. There needs to be emotion into it, and that emotion needs to be based on what do you value in life? What is important to you? And how is a healthy financial life going to leave you feeling emotionally, whether it's a decision today or decisions down the road? I think this is where, we want to get that competent, collaborative, balanced out fiduciary advice. You want to find a financial advisor and other professionals to be on your team in order to catch you when you may be having an emotional moment. I've dealt just in the last couple of weeks with a couple of situations where I had actually Molly, the gal who works in my office, is in the process of purchasing a vehicle, and they pushed that extended warranty on her, and she was just not feeling comfortable with it. And we, talked about it. We worked it out. We set the emotion aside, and she made a decision based on, rationalizing through, implications of either getting the warranty, the cost of it, long term, short term, and what the other side would look like. So having somebody to kind of walk alongside you, to be your advocate, to kind of play out different scenarios, especially with these big ticket decisions that are going to have big major implications in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had a nickname for it. I'm sure you've heard it before, but the No Man. One of my buddies was going to go buy an RX-7, and he had been looking around. He's like, Eric, I need you. I was like, what's going on? He goes, I need you to go to a car dealership with me. I need you to be my no man. I'm like, all right.
Yep.
He said, do not let me buy this car today. I'm like, okay. And so, but what he did is he outlined what he wanted, exactly what he wanted. And we went, and the salesman was smooth, and he was slick, and he was doing everything he could to get him in this car. The one thing the car didn't have was a moonroof. That's one thing he really, really wanted as part of a brand new car. And I told him, I said, well, it doesn't have the moonroof, so you definitely can't get this one because it's not what you want. And salesman immediately said, oh, we can put one in. So it ended up that he got an incredible deal. He did buy the car, but everything, it fit within his budget. Everything that he wanted, he got under what he was willing to pay already. But if it had been, if I hadn't been there, he may have come out with that car without the moonroof on it, and that ended up being installed for free. So, I mean, it's important to have somebody that you can just at least bounce ideas off of, thoughts off of, so they can give you that rational moment, right? Exactly what you're talking about. You're not going to say no all the time, Danielle, but you're certainly going to be able to say, well, let's take a look at what that extended warranty covers, how much it costs, and could you accomplish the same thing for maybe putting an extra $200 into savings every month just in case? And then all of a sudden, well, look, you didn't have any repairs. You're selling the car, and now look what you've got in savings that you didn't spend on this exorbitant warranty that you didn't really need. Right?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I mean, everybody needs somebody in their corner, and I know that you have done that for decades with your clients. That's awesome.
That's again, as folks are out there looking for a good financial advisor, I think the idea that we have to break in this industry is not that the good advisors out there are not about shaming and guilting you and making you feel bad that you haven't saved enough for retirement. They're all about helping you create a healthy financial life where your financial decisions represent, undergird, support you in living out your values, your version of true prosperity. And good financial decisions in your life are going to be aligned with what is important with you. They're going to leave you feeling at peace and in unison, and in alignment with, whether it's a spouse or family members, so you want to find somebody who's going to be an advocate, a cheerleader, help you make these kinds of decisions, balancing out the emotional and rational side, and finding a way to make your version of true prosperity happen and utilize the financial tools as wisely as possible.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. All right.
It took my fridge to kind of remind me how easily we get off track. And I've had several. I mean, our office, we've lost our phone system in the last month. We had computers go down. We have just been, my lessons around this have just been so in my face that I thought it would make a good conversation for our podcast today. I think the other piece that came out of this is it's also kept in the forefront how grateful I am for good neighbors, for good friends, and for working appliances.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to use that technique you taught me when my wife asks me what I want for dinner. I'll just put my finger in my nose and start breathing. And when she asks why I have my finger in my nose, I'll say, I just need my whole brain to make a decision.
Not in your nose, on the side of your nose.
Oh, come on. It's more fun if it's in there. Okay. As long as it's not both at the same time, right? We don't plug both and then try to breathe and then pass out.
There we go.
Danielle, if people are listening to this podcast and they say, you know what, I would appreciate someone walking beside me. I would like somebody to be that voice of reason when I have the emotions pretty high. How do they get a hold of you?
Well, if folks want to reach out to us directly for a journey of financial health or to talk about how we can walk alongside them with their investment wealth management strategies, you can reach out to us at wealthbydesign4u.com. If you want to read my blogs, listen to more podcasts, take a look at some of the educational opportunities that we've got either online or in group settings, you can take a look at Danielle Howard, DanielleHoward, u.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Appreciate your time.
You bet. And thank you all for listening to the Wealth Done Differently Retirement Podcast with Danielle Howard. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Danielle comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at Wealth Done Differently Retirement, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth Done Differently Retirement Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Wealth by Design, LLC. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Danielle Howard, Certified Financial Planner, is an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities offered through Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Cambridge and Wealth by Design, LLC are not affiliated.